The line between survival and surrender blurs when courage stands alone in the wilderness. In the rugged Colorado territory of 1873, one woman's journey to meet her future husband became a test of resilience that would challenge everything she believed about strength, belonging, and the unwritten boundaries between worlds. Her choices, made in a moment of devastating loss, would forge an unexpected alliance that would echo through the mountains for generations to come. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The stagecoach rattled violently as it navigated the narrow mountain pass, each jolt threatening to overturn the weathered vehicle. Eleanor Mitchell pressed her shoulder against the rough wooden wall, steadying herself against the violent motions that had become the rhythm of her journey west. 5 days of hard travel from St. Louis had left her exhausted, her once neat traveling dress rumpled and stained with dust, her carefully pinned hair coming loose beneath her bonnet. But discomfort meant little compared to what awaited her at journey's end. A new life, a fresh start, and James Parker, the man whose letters had convinced her to leave everything familiar behind. "Last stop before Silver Lake," the driver called. Down, his voice barely audible above the thunder of hooves and creaking wood. "Crossing Creek Trading Post coming up." Eleanor straightened, adjusting her appearance as best she could. In her reticule, safely tucked beneath layers of practical belongings, lay the most recent letter from James. His neat, measured handwriting had described the trading post he'd established 3 years earlier at the crossroads of settler routes and Pawnee hunting grounds. A humble beginning, he'd written, but with promise for growth and prosperity. "You'll find it lacks the refinements of Boston," his letter had cautioned, "but what it lacks in sophistication, it makes up for in possibility." The coach slowed, then lurched to a stop. Eleanor gathered her courage along with her traveling bag. Practical considerations had driven her to answer James Parker's advertisement for a bride. At 26, with no inheritance, and her teaching position eliminated, options in Boston had grown scarce. But over months of correspondence, practical considerations had blossomed into something more hopeful. James's letters revealed a thoughtful, determined man building something meaningful in this wild territory. The driver opened the door, offering a weathered hand to assist her descent. "Crossing Creek, ma'am. Parker's trading post is just yonder." Eleanor stepped down, her legs stiff from confinement. The April air carried a bracing chill, snow-capped mountains looming in the distance beneath. A sky of startling clarity. Before her stood a substantial log structure, smoke rising from its stone chimney, a wooden sign proclaiming Parker's Trading Post, swinging slightly in the mountain breeze. But something was wrong. The expected bustle of a trading establishment was absent. No horses stood hitched outside, no customers moved about the porch. The windows were shuttered despite the mid-afternoon hour, and an unnatural stillness hung over the place. The driver unloaded her trunk, setting it beside her with a thud that echoed in the unsettling quiet. "Seems mighty still," he observed, hand moving instinctively to the rifle mounted beside his seat. "Mr. Parker was expecting you today?" "Yes," Eleanor confirmed, unease growing as she surveyed the silent building. His last letter confirmed it. He was to meet the stage. A shout from the direction of the trading post drew their attention. A young man emerged from behind the structure, moving with urgent purpose toward them. His clothing reflected a mixture of frontier practicality and native influence, buckskin trousers with a settler's cotton shirt, his dark hair longer than Eastern fashion would permit. "You shouldn't be here," he called as he approached, voice tight with tension. "It ain't safe." The driver's hand closed around his rifle. "We're just delivering Miss Mitchell to James Parker." The young man's expression shifted. Recognition followed immediately by something darker, regret, perhaps, or pity. "You're the Boston lady, the one Parker was expecting?" Eleanor stepped forward, alarm rising. "I am. Where is Mr. Parker?" The young man removed his hat, a gesture of respect that telegraphed bad news before he spoke. "Name's Thomas Bailey, ma'am. I worked for James. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but there's been trouble. 3 days ago, mountain raiders came down from the north passes. The world seemed to tilt beneath Eleanor's feet, the mountain air suddenly insufficient for breathing. "Mr. Parker?" Thomas's eyes dropped to the dusty ground. "They killed him, ma'am. Him and 2 others. Burned half the storehouse before the Pawnee from the nearby settlement heard the commotion and drove them off. 5 years of teaching young ladies proper deportment had instilled in Eleanor an almost reflexive composure, even as her future collapsed. Around her she maintained an outward steadiness, though her gloved hands gripped her traveling bag with white-knuckled intensity. "I see," she managed, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "And the trading post?" Thomas seemed surprised by the question. "Closed up for now. I've been keeping watch, waiting for the territorial marshal. He's due from Silver Lake any day." The stagecoach driver shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Mitchell, we continue to Silver Lake in 20 minutes. Under the circumstances, I expect you'll want to arrange passage back east from there." The practical suggestion penetrated Eleanor's shock. Return east to what? Her teaching position filled, her small rooms rented to another, her meager savings depleted by this journey west. The stark reality of her situation crystallized with brutal clarity. "No," she said with sudden certainty. "I will not be continuing to Silver Lake." Thomas stared at her in confusion. "Begging your pardon, ma'am, but you can't mean to stay here. It ain't proper and it ain't safe. These raiders, they're getting bolder with each season." Eleanor squared, her shoulders decision-forming even as she spoke. "Mr. Parker and I had a contract. He needed someone to help manage accounts and correspondence for his business. The fact of his death, tragic as it is, doesn't negate my skills or my need for employment." "Managing a trading post ain't like teaching school," Thomas protested. "This is rough country with rougher men." Parker was respected, but even he had trouble with some of the hunters and trappers passing through. The driver checked his pocket watch impatiently. "Miss Mitchell, I must prepare for departure." "Then do so," Eleanor replied with a calmness she didn't feel. "My trunk stays here," as Thomas reluctantly helped move her trunk onto the trading post's porch. Eleanor surveyed what was to have been her new home. Beyond the main building she could see a smaller cabin, James's residence, she presumed, and what would have been hers as well. Beyond that, the dense pine forest stretched toward mountains that seemed to scrape the very sky. In the opposite direction, perhaps a half-mile distant, thin columns of smoke rose from what must be the Pawnee settlement Thomas had mentioned. Another world entirely, separated from this one by more than mere distance. "The raiders?" she asked Thomas as the stagecoach departed in a cloud of dust. "Who are they?" Thomas secured the last shutter, eyeing the lengthening shadows with evident unease. "Call themselves the Blackwell Gang. 7, maybe 8 men led by Silas Blackwell. Used to be trappers before the beaver gave out. Now they prey on isolated homesteads, mining camps, supply wagons. They've never hit a trading post this established before. They're getting desperate, bolder." Eleanor followed him inside, blinking as her eyes adjusted to the dim interior. Oil lamps cast weak illumination across a cavernous room divided between living quarters and store space. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with provisions, tools, and goods for trade. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, its embers banked low. "Mr. Parker was preparing for your arrival," Thomas said awkwardly, gesturing toward a corner where flowers, now wilting, stood in a pottery vase. A small desk had been positioned near a window, presumably for the accounting work she was to undertake. The simple evidence of James's anticipation struck Eleanor with unexpected force. She removed her bonnet, using the moment to compose herself. Where was he buried? she asked quietly. "Behind the cabin, ma'am. Pawnee helped me dig the graves. Their medicine man performed some rituals alongside my reading from the Bible. Mr. Parker traded fair with them for years. They respected him." Eleanor moved to the window, gazing toward the distant smoke of the Pawnee settlement. "And now they'll have no trading post. Marshall will likely send someone to take over, or the property will be auctioned," Thomas explained. "That's how these things typically work out here." A soft knock at the trading post door interrupted them. Thomas tensed, hand moving to the pistol at his hip before cautiously approaching. "Who's there?" "Morning Cloud," came the reply, a woman's voice with the cadence of someone speaking a second language. Thomas visibly relaxed, unfastening the heavy wooden bar across the door. "She's Pawnee," he explained to Eleanor. "Their healer. She's been checking on me since it happened." The woman who entered carried herself with quiet dignity despite the burden of age evident in her silver-streaked hair and lined face. She wore a buckskin dress adorned with intricate beadwork, her sharp eyes immediately focusing on Eleanor with undisguised curiosity. "The woman from Parker's letters," Morning Cloud stated rather than asked, her assessment thorough but not unkind. "You have come far to find only sorrow. This is Miss Eleanor Mitchell," Thomas introduced awkwardly. "Miss Mitchell, this is Morning Cloud of the Pawnee settlement." Eleanor inclined her head respectfully. "I'm sorry for the circumstances of our meeting. I understand your people helped defend this place." Morning Cloud's weathered face remained impassive. Parker traded fairly. His coffee did not hide bitter intentions. His scales measured true for all. She studied Eleanor's face with disconcerting intensity. "What will you do now, woman from the East? The metal bird has flown away without you." The question cut to the heart of Eleanor's uncertain position. What indeed would she do? The sensible course, returning east, was both practically impossible and personally unthinkable. The alternative, somehow trying to claim a place in this harsh, unfamiliar world, seemed equally impossible. Yet as Eleanor stood in what should have been her new home, surrounded by the remnants of James Parker's ambitions and the watchful gazes of these two strangers from worlds utterly unlike her own, something unexpected stirred within her. Not just determination born of desperation, but a sense that fate had delivered her to this precise moment for reasons yet unclear. "I intend to stay," Eleanor stated, the words becoming real as she spoke them. "At least until I understand exactly what happened here and what can be salvaged." Thomas exchanged a glance with Morning Cloud, surprise evident in his expression. "The marshal won't likely recognize any claim you have to this property, given the circumstances." "Perhaps not," Eleanor acknowledged, "but until he arrives, I see no reason why we cannot continue operations on a limited basis. You know the business, Mr. Bailey. I have experience with accounts and correspondence. Between us, we might keep this enterprise functional until more permanent arrangements can be made." Morning Cloud's expression shifted subtly, a new assessment forming behind her dark eyes. "The Pawnee need trading post. Winter comes again after summer. Seeds, tools, medicine, all must be traded for." The practical consideration strengthened Eleanor's resolve. Whatever her personal circumstances, this trading post served a vital function for both settlers and the Pawnee community. Its loss would ripple beyond her individual concerns. As darkness fell across the Colorado wilderness, Eleanor Mitchell stood in what should have been her bridal home, making plans with a rough-edged young frontiersman and an aging Pawnee healer. None of them could know that this unlikely alliance, formed in the shadow of violence and loss, would soon be tested by forces more dangerous than mountain raiders, or that Eleanor's decision to stay would set in motion events that would transform not just her own life, but the delicate balance of power throughout the entire territory. Thomas lit additional lamps as night deepened around the trading post. "You can take the cabin," he he offered. "I've been sleeping here in the store since it happened, keeping watch, safer that way." Eleanor nodded, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming as the day's shocks and revelations caught up with her. Tomorrow would bring challenges enough. Tonight, she needed to gather her strength and her wits. As Morning Cloud prepared to return to her settlement, she paused at the door, fixing Eleanor with that penetrating gaze once more. Parker believed Eastern Woman would bring new strength to this place, she said quietly. Perhaps he saw true, even through death's shadow. With those cryptic words, she departed, leaving Eleanor to contemplate the uncertain path ahead. A path far different from the one she had imagined when stepping onto the stagecoach in St. Louis, yet one she was determined to walk with whatever courage she could muster. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dawn broke over the Colorado mountains in streaks of gold and crimson, painting the trading post in deceptive tranquility. Eleanor woke disoriented, the unfamiliar surroundings of James Parker's cabin momentarily confusing, until memories of the previous day crashed back. She had slept in her traveling clothes atop the quilt of a bed meant for a bride and groom, too exhausted to do more than remove her boots before succumbing to sleep. A soft knock at the cabin door roused her fully. Eleanor hastily smoothed her rumpled dress and attempted to tame her hair before opening the door to find Thomas Bailey, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. "Figured you might want coffee, Mom," he said, offering a steaming tin cup. "Made it. Strong frontier style." Eleanor accepted gratefully, the bitter liquid reviving her senses. "Thank you, Mr. Bailey. I'll need just a few minutes to make myself presentable, then I'd like a complete accounting of the trading post's current situation." Thomas nodded, clearly relieved by her businesslike approach. "I'll get things ready." In the main building, alone again, Eleanor opened her trunk, selecting her most practical dress, a navy cotton with minimal ornamentation. She had packed for the life of a trading post proprietor's wife, not a society lady, but even her most sensible attire felt oddly formal in this rustic setting. After washing with cold water from a basin and securing her hair in a simple knot, she steeled herself for the day ahead. Outside, the morning revealed details obscured by yesterday's shock and fading light. The trading post stood at a natural crossroads, where a clear mountain stream met the main trail. Beyond the main building and cabin, Eleanor now noticed a small stable, a storehouse with visible fire damage to one side, and a vegetable garden, beginning to show early spring growth. A crude wooden cross marked a spot behind the cabin. Eleanor paused there, removing her gloves to trace the letters roughly carved into the wood. James Parker, 1837-1873. Beside it stood two similar markers for the other victims, William Scott and Henry Rogers, according to Thomas Trappers, who had been resupplying when the raiders struck. "I never had the chance to know you," Eleanor whispered to the silent grave, "but I intend to honor the vision that brought me here." In the trading post's main room, Thomas had laid out ledgers and inventory lists on the broad counter. His discomfort with paperwork was evident in his posture. "Mr. Parker kept detailed records," he explained, pushing a leather-bound ledger toward her. "I can tell you what goods we have and what state they're in, but the figures and such were his domain." Eleanor opened the ledger, finding James's neat handwriting cataloging transactions, supplies, accounts, and debts. She immediately understood why he had sought a partner with accounting skills. The business was more complex than she had imagined, serving not just as a retail establishment, but as a hub for multiple economic exchanges between settlers, military, expeditions, trappers, miners, and several native communities. "The raiders took most of our currency," Thomas reported grimly. "About $60 in coins and notes. They also grabbed the prime furs, tobacco and ammunition. Tried to burn the storehouse too, but the Pawnee arrived before they could finish the job." Eleanor made notes as he spoke, creating a systematic assessment of their situation. "What's our most valuable remaining stock?" Thomas seemed surprised by the question. "The coffee and sugar, I reckon. Then tools, axes, saws and such. Got a fair supply of seed for spring planting too. Settlers around these parts depend on that." "And our most pressing debts?" "Supply wagon from Denver is due in 3 weeks. Parker already paid half up front, but the balance comes to nearly $100. Eleanor nodded, continuing through the ledgers. "What about these accounts with the Pawnee? I see entries for Hunting Cloud and others with similar names." "That's Morning Cloud's son," Thomas explained. "The Pawnee don't use currency much. They trade furs, meat, crafts. Parker extended credit sometimes through winter months. They always settled accounts come spring hunting season." By midday, Eleanor had developed a clearer picture of their tenuous position. The trading post retained enough inventory to continue limited operations and fulfill its obligations to the community, but the cash reserves were depleted, and the loss of Parker himself represented the greatest blow. His relationships with suppliers, customers, and the Pawnee had been the invisible foundation upon which the business stood. "Mr. Bailey," she said finally, closing the last ledger, "what is your official position here?" Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "Parker hired me 2 years back. I handle the horses, repairs, help with customers. I can read some and write my name, but figures aren't my strong suit." "And your plans now?" Eleanor asked directly. "I have no authority to retain your services, but I would consider it a personal favor if you would stay until the marshal arrives." Before Thomas could respond, the trading post door opened. 3 Pawnee men entered, led by a tall figure whose bearing suggested authority. Behind them came Morning Cloud, who nodded to Eleanor with subtle acknowledgement. "This is Hunting Cloud," Thomas introduced quietly. "Morning Cloud's son and a respected hunter among the Pawnee. The others are Swift River and Young Elk." Eleanor stood, inclining her head respectfully. "Welcome to Parker's trading post. I am Eleanor Mitchell." Hunting Cloud studied her with the same penetrating intensity his mother had displayed, though his expression revealed more skepticism. "My mother says you claim Parker's place now." "I make no legal claims," Eleanor clarified. "I arrived expecting to marry Mr. Parker and assist with his business. Until proper authorities determine the future of this establishment, I intend to maintain its operations as best I can." The Pawnee man seemed to weigh her words carefully. "Parker was killed because he refused to tell raiders where Pawnee Winter Camp was located. They wanted our horses, our winter furs. He died protecting our people." The revelation stunned Eleanor. James Parker had died not simply as a victim of random violence, but making a moral choice that cost him his life. "I didn't know," she said softly. "Now you do," Hunting Cloud replied. "So I ask, will this place still trade fairly with Pawnee? Or will new owner turn us away when territorial agent comes?" It was a pivotal question that cut to the heart of Eleanor's uncertain authority. The trading post's relationship with the Pawnee represented more than commercial transactions. It was a fragile bridge between worlds, increasingly in conflict. "As long as I have any influence here," she answered carefully, "this trading post will maintain fair dealings with all who come in peace. That is my promise to you." Hunting Cloud exchanged glances with his companions before responding. "Words are easy. Actions prove truth." He placed a bundle of prime beaver pelts on the counter. "We need coffee, salt, and medicine for children's." "Cough, will you trade?" Eleanor recognized the test for what it was. She consulted Parker's ledger, noting the previous rates of exchange, then nodded to Thomas to gather the requested items. "Your credit is good here," she told Hunting Cloud, "but these furs more than cover what you've asked for. Would you like additional supplies, or shall I record the balance toward future trades?" A flicker of surprise crossed the Pawnee hunter's face at her fair accounting. "Record balance," he decided after a moment. Winter was hard. Spring hunting must be better. As Thomas carefully measured coffee and salt, Eleanor noticed Morning Cloud observing the proceedings with quiet approval. The old woman stepped forward, placing a small bundle of dried plants on the counter. "For night cough," she explained to Eleanor. "Mix with honey. Better than white man's medicine for children." The unexpected offering created a moment of connection between the two women. Eleanor accepted it with genuine gratitude. "Thank you, I'll remember this." After the Pawnee departed, Thomas let out a long breath. "You handled that well. Some traders would have taken advantage, knowing they needed those supplies regardless of price." Short-term gain at the expense of long-term relationships is poor business strategy, Eleanor replied, carefully recording the transaction in the ledger. "Besides, basic decency shouldn't be commended as exceptional." Thomas regarded her with new respect. Parker would have said something similar. The remainder of the day passed in methodical assessment and organization. Eleanor tallied inventory, reviewed outstanding accounts, and drafted notices to Parker's suppliers, informing them of his death and the temporary continuation of business operations. Whether she had any legal right to make such representations remained uncertain, but maintaining the trading post's commercial relationships seemed the most responsible course until official decisions could be made. As evening approached, Thomas secured the shutters and barred the main door. "I'll keep watch tonight," he assured her. "The raiders don't typically return so quickly to the same location, but caution serves us well out here." Eleanor nodded gratefully, exhaustion settling over her again. As she prepared to return to the cabin, a rider approached from the Silver Lake direction. Thomas immediately grew alert, hand moving to his sidearm. "Stay inside," he instructed, peering through a gap in the shutters. His tension eased slightly. "It's Sam Wilson from the Whitaker Ranch, likely bringing news." The newcomer was a weathered man in his 40s, trail dust coating his clothes and beard. He dismounted cautiously, rifle ready as he approached. "That you, Bailey?" he called. "Heard about Parker. Came to see if the stories were true." Thomas unbarred the door to admit him. Wilson swept off his hat upon seeing Eleanor, surprise evident in his expression. "Sam, this is Miss Eleanor Mitchell," Thomas introduced. "She arrived yesterday, expecting to marry Parker. Miss Mitchell, Sam Wilson works the Whitaker cattle spread 15 miles south." Wilson's ruddy face registered a complex mix of sympathy and confusion. "Ma'am, sorry for your loss and your difficult circumstances." He turned to Thomas. "Word spreading about the raid. Marshal Collins sent riders to all the outlying properties. He's gathering a posse to hunt down the Blackwell." When?" Thomas asked eagerly. 2 days from now, meeting at Silver Lake." Wilson hesitated, glancing toward Eleanor. "There's other news too, not good. Territorial Governor's office sent an agent named Hargrove to assess the situation. Word is he's got plans for consolidating trade operations in the territory. Parker's place would be valuable to certain interests in Denver." The implications were clear. Forces beyond simple law and order were circling. With James Parker dead, the trading post represented an opportunity for those with political connections. "How long before this agent arrives?" Eleanor asked. "Week, maybe less," Wilson replied. "Rode out from Denver 3 days ago, according to the telegraph operator in Silver Lake." After Wilson departed, with promises to return with any new information, Eleanor and Thomas sat in grim silence by the fireplace's dying embers. "Territorial agents have authority to reassign property rights in certain circumstances," Thomas finally said, "especially businesses that serve strategic purposes." Eleanor stared into the glowing coals. "Do you know anything about this Hargrove?" "Only rumors. Works for people with influence in Denver. Not known for sympathy toward independent operators or fair dealings with native tribes." The information crystallized Eleanor's nebulous concerns into a concrete threat. Beyond the immediate dangers of mountain raiders lurked more insidious forces, political and economic interests that would reshape this frontier with little regard for those who had built their lives here. "A week," she murmured. "That's how long we have to establish some legitimate claim to this place, or at least ensure it doesn't fall into hands that would destroy what Mr. Parker built." Thomas studied her with curious intensity. "You're serious about staying, aren't you? This isn't just temporary until you can arrange passage east." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "I came west seeking a new beginning, Mr. Bailey. The circumstances have changed dramatically, but my reasons remain. I have nothing to return to in Boston, and I find I'm not willing to surrender to fate without at least attempting to shape it myself." Outside, darkness had settled completely over the Colorado wilderness. Somewhere in that darkness, multiple forces were converging toward this trading post. Lawmen pursuing raiders, political agents advancing territorial ambitions, and unknown others with their own designs. Eleanor Mitchell, who had journeyed west to become a wife, now found herself the unlikely custodian of a precarious legacy caught between colliding worlds. The path ahead remained obscured, but as she retired to the cabin that should have been her marital home, Eleanor was certain of one thing: she would face whatever came with clear eyes and firm resolve. The woman who had boarded the stagecoach in St. Louis had sought security in a traditional arrangement. The woman who now stood at the crossroads of multiple frontiers was discovering resources within herself she had never suspected existed. The next morning brought a flurry of activity to the trading post. Eleanor rose before dawn, determined to establish new routines. She'd spent half the night reviewing James Parker's ledgers, absorbing the details of his business operations and customer relationships. The man she'd never met was revealing himself through his meticulous record-keeping, fair-minded, methodical, and surprisingly literate in his descriptions of frontier dynamics. She had just finished pinning her hair when a commotion outside drew her attention. Through the cabin window, she spotted Thomas in heated conversation with a tall, official-looking man on horseback. Two other riders flanked him, their expressions suggesting military or law enforcement backgrounds. Eleanor quickly donned her shawl and hurried outside, the cool mountain air carrying the scent of pine and wood smoke. "Absolutely necessary that I speak with whoever claims authority here," the official was saying as she approached. His crisp Eastern accent and immaculate attire marked him as distinctly out of place in the frontier setting. As I was explaining, Thomas replied with barely concealed frustration, "Miss Mitchell has as much claim as anyone at present, given her arrangement with the late Mr. Parker." The man turned toward Eleanor, his assessment uncomfortably thorough as he took in her appearance. "Miss Mitchell, I presume. I am Howard Ketchum, Territorial Administrator for Commercial Affairs. These gentlemen are Deputies Morris and Walker." Eleanor inclined her head politely, instantly alert to the unexpected early arrival of official interest. "Mr. Ketchum, you're from Agent Hargrove's office." A flicker of surprise crossed Ketchum's face. "You're well informed. I'm here to conduct a preliminary assessment of this establishment prior to Mr. Hargrove's arrival. The death of Mr. Parker represents a significant disruption to regional commerce." "Won't you come inside?" Eleanor offered, gesturing toward the trading post. "We can discuss matters more comfortably there." Inside, Eleanor moved with deliberate confidence behind the counter, establishing a subtle position of authority. Thomas remained near the door, watchful and tense. "Coffee, Mr. Ketchum?" she offered, pouring a cup without waiting for his response. "It's genuine Brazilian, Mr. Parker's preferred stock." Ketchum accepted the cup with a thin smile. "Very hospitable, Miss Mitchell. But let's address the matter directly. You arrived expecting to marry Parker, correct? A mail order arrangement?" "We had corresponded for nearly 8 months," Eleanor confirmed, refusing to be shamed by his tone. Mr. Parker required assistance with his accounts and correspondence. I possessed those skills. Yet no marriage took place, and thus no legal claim to this property exists, Ketchum stated flatly. Parker died intestate, with no known relatives. Under territorial law, strategic commercial establishments revert to territorial authority for reassignment. Eleanor maintained her composure. I understand the legal technicalities, Mr. Ketchum. However, this trading post serves vital functions for both settlers and indigenous communities. Any disruption to its operations would cause significant hardship. The territory recognizes its importance, Ketchum agreed smoothly, which is precisely why we must ensure it passes into capable hands. And these capable hands would belong to whom exactly? Eleanor asked, though she suspected the answer. Ketchum set down his coffee cup. Several established commercial interests have expressed willingness to expand operations in this region. Consolidated Trading Company in particular has the resources and experience to manage such remote outposts efficiently. Thomas made a disgusted sound. Consolidated runs their trading posts like military camps. They charge settlers double Denver prices and refuse to trade with Indians unless they're selling prime furs. Economic realities often require certain efficiencies, Ketchum replied dismissively. Sentiment has no place in territorial development. Eleanor studied the administrator carefully. When does Agent Hargrove expect to make his determination? He'll arrive within 5 days. Until then, you may continue limited operations. Ketchum rose, adjusting his immaculate coat. I recommend using that time to arrange your return east, Miss Mitchell. The frontier is no place for an unattached, educated woman. Denver maintains a charitable fund for repatriating those who find themselves in unfortunate circumstances. After Ketchum and his deputies departed, Thomas slammed his fist against a support beam. Consolidated's been trying to monopolize trade in the territory for years. They've got half the territorial officials in their pocket. 5 days, Eleanor murmured. Less time than we thought. Won't matter how much time we have, Thomas said bitterly. Hargrove's decision is already made. Ketchum was just going through the motions. Eleanor turned to the window, watching dust rise from the departing officials' horses. Perhaps. But I've taught enough young ladies to recognize when someone is testing boundaries. Mr. Ketchum expected a tearful, overwhelmed female, grateful for his offered charity. Our response surprised him. Surprise won't stop Consolidated from taking over, Thomas pointed out. No, Eleanor agreed, but it might make Mr. Hargrove pause long enough to consider alternatives. She straightened her shoulders. Mr. Bailey, I believe it's time we reopened for business. Together, they unbarred the main doors and opened the shutters, allowing sunlight to stream into the trading post for the first time since the raid. Eleanor arranged the most appealing goods on prominent display while Thomas brought in firewood and stoked the main hearth, creating an atmosphere of welcoming normalcy there. First customer arrived within the hour. Martha Jenkins, a weather-beaten woman from a homestead 3 miles west. Her surprise at finding Eleanor behind the counter quickly gave way to practical concerns. Heard about poor James, she said, setting a basket of eggs on the counter. Territory's getting more dangerous by the season. Need flour and coffee if you're still trading. Eleanor handled the transaction with efficient grace, recording it precisely in Parker's ledger. By midday, word had spread, and a steady trickle of settlers appeared. Some out of genuine need, others clearly curious about the Boston woman managing Parker's place. Most significant was the arrival of 2 Pawnee families mid-afternoon, led by a young man Thomas identified as Tall Pine. They brought beautifully tanned deer hides and handcrafted moccasins to trade, watching Eleanor carefully to see how she would receive them. Drawing on Parker's ledger records, Eleanor offered fair values for their goods adding extra coffee as a gesture of goodwill. The tension in Tall Pine's posture eased slightly, and before departing, he spoke quietly to Thomas in the Pawnee language. "What did he say?" Eleanor asked after they'd gone. Thomas hesitated. "He said, Morning Cloud has called for a council tonight. The Pawnee need to decide if they'll continue trading here or take their business to Silver Lake. Despite our fair treatment today, it's not about today," Thomas explained. "It's about tomorrow and all the days after. If Consolidated takes over, the Pawnee will be unwelcome or exploited. They need to prepare." Eleanor nodded, understanding the stakes more clearly. The trading post wasn't just a business. It was a neutral ground where different worlds intersected, where relationships transcended mere commerce. Its loss would ripple through the entire region in ways Ketchum and his associates either didn't understand or deliberately ignored. As evening approached and they prepared to close, a lone rider appeared on the trail from Silver Lake. Thomas tensed, reaching for his rifle until recognition dawned. "It's Marshal David Collins," he informed Eleanor. "Territorial law for this district. The man who dismounted in the yard was nothing like the polished Ketchum. Marshal Collins wore a weathered duster over practical frontier clothing, his badge the only official indication of his authority. His face bore the lines of a man who spent most of his life outdoors, his eyes sharp and assessing beneath the brim of his battered hat. "Heard you reopened," he said by way of greeting, entering the trading post and surveying the reorganized space. "Bold move, considering." Marshal Collins. Thomas nodded respectfully. "This is Miss Eleanor Mitchell. She arrived expecting to marry Parker." Collins studied Eleanor with frank curiosity. "Ma'am, sorry about Parker. He was a good man." "So, I've been learning," Eleanor replied, "though I never had the chance to know him personally." The marshal accepted the coffee Thomas offered, leaning against the counter. "Got a posse gathering tomorrow, going after Blackwell and his bunch. 6 men confirmed dead from their raids. This season alone. Can't let it continue." "Will the Silver Lake posse be large enough?" Eleanor asked. "I understand these raiders know the mountain passes intimately." Collins gave her an appraising look. "Most women would be asking about their own safety, not tactical assessments." "I've never found ignorance particularly protective, Marshal." Eleanor replied evenly. A ghost of a smile touched Collins' weathered face. "Fair point. Posse'll number 15, maybe 20. Got some experienced trackers. Problem is, Blackwell's likely got lookouts watching the main approaches." "The Pawnee know those mountains better than any white man," Thomas suggested cautiously. Collins nodded slowly. "Been considering that angle. Problem is, relations between Silver Lake folk and the Pawnee are strained at best. Territorial authorities don't look kindly on marshals deputizing Indians, even against common enemies. Yet you're considering it anyway," Eleanor observed. "Justice doesn't much care about bureaucratic preferences," Collins replied dryly. He finished his coffee, setting the cup down with a decisive thunk. "Ketchum and his deputies rode through Silver Lake this morning. Man couldn't hide his smugness if you paid him. He made it clear the trading post will likely be reassigned to Consolidated," Eleanor confirmed. Collins snorted. "Consolidated's been buying up half the territory. Their president, Harrison Wells, dines with the governor monthly." He studied Eleanor thoughtfully. "You don't strike me as someone who gives up easily, Miss Mitchell." "I came west for a new beginning, Marshal," she replied. "The circumstances have changed dramatically, but my purpose hasn't." "Purpose being?" "To build something meaningful, to apply my skills where they're needed." Mr. Parker's letters described a vision for this trading post as more than just a commercial venture, as a place where different communities could interact with mutual respect. Collins glanced at Thomas, who nodded confirmation. "Sounds like Parker," the marshal agreed. "Always was an idealist beneath his practical exterior." He straightened, adjusting his gun belt. 5 days isn't much time to establish a legitimate claim, but territorial law does have certain provisions for homestead rights and business continuity. Eleanor leaned forward, suddenly alert. What provisions specifically? Can't rightly recall. The details, Collins said, though something in his tone suggested otherwise. But Judge Hawkins in Silver Lake is the authority on such matters. Man's got every territorial statute memorized. Might be worth consulting him before Hargrove makes his appearance. After the marshal departed with promises to keep them informed about the posse's progress, Eleanor and Thomas secured the trading post for the night. The marshal was trying to tell us something without saying it directly, Eleanor observed. As they checked the window shutters, Collins is a good man in a difficult position, Thomas agreed. He enforces the law, but he doesn't always agree with how it's written. He paused, hesitating before continuing. Miss Mitchell, I should tell you, there's a Pawnee council tonight, and Morning Cloud has invited us to attend. Eleanor looked up in surprise. Both of us? She specifically asked for the Eastern woman with sunrise hair, Thomas confirmed, a hint of amusement breaking through his usual reserve. I believe that's you. Why would they include me in tribal deliberations? Because what happens to this trading post affects them directly, Thomas explained, and because Morning Cloud seems to have taken an interest in you for reasons of her own. Eleanor considered this unexpected development. Attending a Pawnee council represented steps into territory few white women had navigated, culturally, politically, and perhaps legally as well. When do we leave? She asked, decision already made. Thomas smiled slightly. I told Morning Cloud we'd come if you were willing. They'll send an escort at moonrise. He gestured toward the cabin. You might want to change into something less Eastern. Where we're going, Boston fashions will just get in the way. As Eleanor returned to the cabin to prepare, she caught sight of her reflection in the small mirror above the wash basin. The proper Bostonian schoolteacher was already fading, replaced by a woman with determined eyes and newfound purpose. 5 days to save Parker's legacy, to secure her own future, and perhaps to forge an alliance that territorial authorities never anticipated. Moonrise would bring her first steps into a world beyond anything she had imagined when responding to James. Parker's advertisement for a bride. Whatever came next would require courage, adaptability, and the willingness to cross boundaries few of her background would contemplate. Eleanor Mitchell straightened her shoulders, ready to meet the challenge head-on. Moonlight transformed the Colorado wilderness, casting silver light across the rugged landscape. Eleanor had changed into her simplest dress and sturdy boots, with a borrowed woolen shawl from Parker's stores wrapped around her shoulders against the night chill. Thomas wore his usual frontier attire, a rifle slung casually across his back. A necessity rather than a threat in these mountains after dark. They waited silently by the corral until 2 Pawnee riders materialized from the shadows. Young Elk, whom Eleanor recognized from the trading party, nodded respectfully before gesturing for them to follow. Thomas helped Eleanor mount the spare horse they'd brought, then swung onto his own gelding. Stay close, he advised quietly. They won't use the main trail. The small party moved into the forest, following paths invisible to Eleanor's untrained eye. The night was alive with sounds. The soft hooting of owls, the distant yip of coyotes, the whisper of wind through pine needles. After nearly 30 minutes of riding, Eleanor detected the glow of fires ahead, and soon they emerged into a clearing nestled between protective rock formations. The Pawnee settlement was larger than Eleanor had imagined, perhaps 20 structures, ranging from traditional earthen lodges to more temporary hide dwellings. At the center burned a substantial council fire, around which sat nearly 30 men and women arranged by age and status. Morning Cloud stood as they approached, raising her hand in greeting. Thomas dismounted first, helping Eleanor down before approaching the gathering. He spoke several phrases in the Pawnee language, which Morning Cloud acknowledged with a nod before responding in English for Eleanor's benefit. "The woman with sunrise hair is welcome at our fire," she announced. "Come, sit. The council has much to discuss this night." Eleanor followed Thomas's lead, taking the place indicated near Morning Cloud. The faces around the fire regarded her with expressions ranging from open curiosity to guarded suspicion. Hunting Cloud sat opposite, his features stern in the flickering light. "My son believes your presence unwise," Morning Cloud explained without preamble. "Others agree, but wisdom sometimes hides in unexpected places." An older man with a scarred face spoke in the Pawnee language. Thomas leaned closer to Eleanor, translating quietly. "That's Stone Bear, one of their most respected warriors. He's saying the trading post has always been run by white men who dictate terms. Why should they trust a white woman instead?" Before Eleanor could respond, Morning Cloud answered Stone Bear in their language, occasionally gesturing toward Eleanor. Though she couldn't understand the words, the old woman's tone suggested she was making a case. "She's telling them about how you dealt fairly with traders today," Thomas whispered, "and that Parker chose you specifically for your skills with numbers and words." Hunting Cloud spoke next, his deep voice commanding attention. Thomas's expression grew concerned as he listened. "He says Consolidated Trading has offered special terms if the Pawnee bring all their business to their outpost near Denver," Thomas explained. "Hunting Cloud thinks it might be safer to accept their offer than to risk depending on a trading post that could change hands." Eleanor listened carefully, observing the subtle shifts in posture and expression among the council members. This wasn't merely a discussion about commercial relationships. It was about survival, about choosing the least dangerous path in a rapidly changing world. When there was a pause in the conversation, Eleanor looked to Morning Cloud. "May I address the council?" she asked quietly. The old woman nodded, and a hush fell over the gathering. Eleanor took a deep breath, choosing her words with care. "I understand your concerns," she began, her voice clear in the night air. "You've known Mr. Parker for years. He earned your trust through consistent actions. I'm a stranger who arrived just days ago, seeking a future that no longer exists as I imagined it." She met the gazes of those around the fire, one by one. "I make no claims to authority or permanence." The territorial administrator made it clear that official decisions about the trading post will come within days. "But I do know this. Consolidated Trading sees you only as a source of profit or inconvenience. James Parker saw you as people, worthy of respect and fair treatment." Hunting Cloud's expression remained skeptical. "Pretty words. But Parker is dead. His ways died with him." "Unless they didn't," Eleanor countered. "Unless the principles that guided his business can continue, regardless of who stands behind his counter." An elderly man wearing elaborate beadwork spoke, his voice carrying the weight of experience. Thomas translated, "Walking Crow asks what you want from the Pawnee. Why come to their council if not to ask for something?" It was a perceptive question that cut to the heart of the matter. Eleanor nodded acknowledgement of its wisdom. "I seek neither charity nor special treatment," she answered. "What I propose is an alliance of mutual interest. The territorial officials arrive in 5 days to determine the trading post's fate. If Consolidated takes control, both the settlement communities and the Pawnee lose a fair trading partner. If we can establish a legitimate claim to continue operations, everyone benefits." Stone Bear spoke again, his tone challenging. Thomas translated, "He asks what you bring to this alliance. Parker knew trading, knew this territory. You are just a woman from the East with soft hands and Eastern ideas." The assessment stung with its partial truth, but Eleanor refused to be defensive. I bring different skills, education, accounting knowledge, experience managing complex operations. I bring fresh eyes unclouded by old prejudices, and yes, I bring soft hands that have never built a cabin or tracked game. But hands can learn new skills if the mind is willing. Morning Cloud smiled slightly at this response, saying something that made several council members nod. Thomas leaned closer to Eleanor. She said, "Wisdom speaks through you. That sometimes new growth comes only after fire clears the forest." A younger woman near the edge of the circle spoke up, her words prompting a ripple of discussion. "That's Blue Sky Woman," Thomas explained. "She's asking if you'll continue Parker's policy of providing medical supplies and treating Pawnee who come seeking help. Her child recovered from fever last winter because of medicine Parker provided." "Of course," Eleanor confirmed immediately. "Medical care isn't a privilege to be granted or withheld based on someone's origins. It's a human necessity." This answer seemed to satisfy Blue Sky Woman, who nodded and spoke again to those nearby. The council's energy shifted subtly, the initial wariness giving way to more thoughtful consideration. Hunting Cloud rose to his feet, commanding attention. "Fine words mean little against territorial law. Hargrove has authority. His agent Ketchum made clear their intentions. What can one woman do against such power?" "Not one woman," Eleanor corrected. "Many people with aligned interests." Marshal Collins hinted at legal provisions that might help establish a claim. Judge Hawkins in Silver Lake apparently knows these regulations well. Local settlers depend on the trading post and have no love for Consolidated's practices. She leaned forward, warming to her argument. "Territorial officials respond to power. Alone, none of us has sufficient influence to sway them. Together, settlers, Pawnee, and those who value fair commerce, we represent a force they must consider." Walking Crow spoke again, his gnarled hands gesturing as he addressed the council at length. Thomas's expression grew increasingly surprised as he listened. "What is he saying?" Eleanor whispered. "He's recounting a vision he had 3 moons ago," Thomas explained quietly. "A dream of a woman with flame-colored hair who came from the east to stand between worlds during a time of change. He believes you might be the fulfillment of that vision." Eleanor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Walking Crow's words created a ripple of murmured discussion around the fire. Clearly, such visions carried significant weight. In Pawnee deliberations, after several minutes of intense conversation among the elders, Hunting Cloud addressed Eleanor directly. "The council will consider this alliance," he stated formally. "But first, we must know if your heart is true. Words float away like smoke. Actions remain like stones." Morning Cloud rose, approaching Eleanor with measured steps. "Come," she said, simply extending her hand. Thomas started to rise as well, but Morning Cloud shook her head. "Only the woman. Some paths must be walked alone." Eleanor hesitated only briefly before accepting the old woman's hand and following her away from the council fire, deeper into the Pawnee settlement. Behind them, the council discussions continued, but their words faded as the 2 women moved between dwellings toward a small lodge set apart from the others. "This is my place of healing," Morning Cloud explained, gesturing Eleanor inside, "where I prepare medicines and tend the sick." The interior was dim, illuminated only by a small fire at its center. Bundles of dried plants hung from the ceiling. Beams and various pouches, stones, and implements were arranged on woven mats. The air carried the complex scent of herbs and smoke. Morning Cloud settled onto a mat, indicating that Eleanor should sit opposite her. "You seek to walk a difficult path," the old woman observed, "between your world and ours, between what was and what might be." "I didn't come west seeking such a role," Eleanor admitted, "but circumstances have presented this challenge, and I "And I'm unwilling to turn away from it." Morning Cloud nodded, as if this confirmed something she already knew. "When I was a young woman, before white settlers came in numbers, I had a vision of great change coming to our lands. Not just the arrival of your people, but a fundamental shifting of the world's foundation. The elders taught me this change could not be stopped, only navigated." She reached for a small leather pouch, untying its drawstring with careful movements. "For many seasons, I have prepared for those who would stand at the crossroads of this change, those few who could see beyond the boundaries others accept as fixed and eternal." From the pouch, Morning Cloud withdrew a simple necklace, a leather cord threaded through a polished stone of deep blue, marked with natural veins of white that created a pattern reminiscent of a river's course. "This stone comes from the sacred mountains to the west," she explained. "Our people believe it holds the wisdom of many generations, the memory of water flowing over stone, gradually creating new paths." She held it toward Eleanor. "I give this to you not as decoration, but as recognition. The path you walk requires seeing with more than just eyes, hearing with more than just ears." Eleanor hesitated, the significance of the moment weighing heavily. "I'm not certain I deserve such a gift. I've done nothing yet to prove myself worthy of your trust." Morning Cloud's weathered face creased in a slight smile. "Worthiness is revealed through time, not claimed in a moment. Take it. Let it remind you that some allies are found where others see only strangers." With careful reverence, Eleanor accepted. The necklace, its stone cool against her palm. As she slipped it over her head, Morning Cloud nodded with approval. "Now," the old woman said, her tone becoming practical, "we must speak of Hargrove and his plans. My son believes fighting the territorial officials is futile. I believe differently." Her dark eyes held Eleanor's steadily. "There are things you must know about this land, about the trading post's true importance, and about James Parker's final days." Outside, the council fire continued to burn as the Pawnee deliberated. Inside Morning Cloud's healing lodge, two women from vastly different worlds began weaving a strategy that would challenge the territorial authorities' assumptions about power, commerce, and the invisible boundaries between communities. The stone at Eleanor's throat seemed to warm against her skin, a small but tangible symbol of unexpected alliance in a land where allegiances were rapidly shifting. As the night deepened around them, Morning Cloud shared information that would fundamentally alter Eleanor's understanding of her situation and potentially provide the key to preserving Parker's legacy against forces that sought to erase it in the name of progress and profit. Dawn was breaking as Eleanor and Thomas rode back to the trading post, pink light spilling over the mountain peaks. Neither had slept, yet Eleanor felt strangely energized, her mind working through the revelations Morning Cloud had shared during their private conversation. "You're quiet," Thomas observed as the trading post came into view. "Did Morning Cloud's information trouble you?" Eleanor touched the blue stone now hanging at her throat, not troubled so much as realigned, like looking at a familiar painting and suddenly seeing an entirely different composition. Thomas nodded, understanding. "She has that effect. Parker used to say she sees patterns others miss." As they dismounted in the yard, Eleanor noticed fresh hoofprints in the dirt. "Someone's been here," she said sharply. Thomas immediately drew his pistol, approaching the main building with caution. The door remained barred as they'd left it, but a folded paper had been wedged between the doorframe and wall. Thomas retrieved it, handing it to Eleanor with a worried expression. "It's sealed with the territorial administration mark," he noted. Eleanor broke the seal, unfolding the document with steady hands. Her expression darkened as she read. "Agent Hargrove has accelerated his schedule. He'll arrive tomorrow, not 5 days from now." She looked up at Thomas. "We've lost precious time." They entered the trading post, secure but eerily quiet in the early morning light. Eleanor moved purposefully to Parker's desk, spreading out the document alongside her notes from the previous night. According to Morning Cloud, Parker discovered something significant in the mountains west of here 3 months ago, she explained, lighting a lamp against the lingering shadows. Something valuable enough that he began taking detailed surveys and making maps. Thomas frowned. Parker never mentioned any discovery to me. He was being cautious, Eleanor replied. Morning Cloud said he confided in her because he needed her knowledge of the terrain. Whatever he found was in a location sacred to the Pawnee. Gold, Thomas suggested. There have been minor strikes throughout these mountains. Eleanor shook her head. Not gold, something potentially more valuable in the long term. Morning Cloud called it the black stone that burns. Recognition dawned on Thomas's face. Coal. There are exposed seams in some of the higher valleys. Settlers sometimes gather surface pieces for their stoves in winter. Parker found more than just surface deposits, Eleanor continued, excitement building in her voice. According to Morning Cloud, he located an extensive underground seam that could supply the entire territory for decades. She spread out a rough map Morning Cloud had drawn. The coal fields lie here, within the boundaries of the hunting grounds. The government granted to the Pawnee in the last treaty. Parker was documenting the find carefully because he understood its implications. Thomas whistled softly. If Consolidated or other commercial interests learned about a major coal deposit, they'd pressure the territorial government to redraw the Pawnee boundaries, just as they've done elsewhere when valuable resources were discovered, Eleanor finished. Parker didn't want that. He was developing a different approach, a formal partnership with the Pawnee that would allow controlled mining while preserving their rights and ensuring they received fair compensation. That's why the Blackwell gang targeted him specifically, Thomas realized. Someone must have gotten wind of his discovery and wanted his maps and documentation. Eleanor nodded grimly, and why he refused to tell them, even as they threatened. His life, he knew what would happen to the Pawnee if that information fell into the wrong hands. She opened one of Parker's ledgers, turning to the back pages, where a series of numbers and letters had been recorded in what appeared to be a private code. Morning Cloud says Parker kept detailed records of the coal discovery, including legal documents outlining his proposed partnership with the Pawnee. He hid them somewhere for safekeeping. Did she know where? No, but she believes these notations are the key. Eleanor tapped the coded entries. Our most pressing task is to decipher Parker's code and locate those documents before Hargrove arrives. If we can establish that Parker had a legal arrangement with the Pawnee regarding the coalfields, it would significantly strengthen our position. Thomas studied the coded entries with a furrowed brow. Parker was methodical about everything. This won't be random. He'd have used some system he could remember without writing down the key. As they puzzled over the code, normal trading post operations resumed. Settlers arrived seeking supplies, sharing news and rumors about the Blackwell gang and the territorial officials' unexpected presence in the region. Eleanor maintained calm efficiency throughout, though her mind remained focused on the hidden documents that might save both the trading post and the Pawnee hunting grounds. Mid-morning brought an unexpected visitor, Judge William Hawkins from Silver Lake, a dignified man in his 60s whose formal attire couldn't quite disguise his frontier practicality. He surveyed the trading post with appreciative eyes before introducing himself to Eleanor. Marshal Collins mentioned you might benefit from some legal perspective, Miss Mitchell, he explained, accepting the coffee she offered. Thought I'd ride out before Hargrove arrives and complicates matters. Eleanor led him to Parker's small office at the rear of the trading post, where they could speak privately. The marshal suggested you might know of legal provisions regarding business continuity or homestead rights. Judge Hawkins nodded, removing a small leather-bound volume from his coat pocket. Territorial Statutes, 1872 edition, Section 47 covers commercial establishments in frontier regions. He flipped through the pages with practiced ease. Under certain circumstances, individuals can establish continuity claims if they can demonstrate legitimate business interest or contractual relationship. With the deceased proprietor, hope flickered in Eleanor's chest. What constitutes a legitimate business interest? Financial investment, formalized partnership agreement, or... The judge paused meaningfully. A binding contract for essential services or management responsibilities. Eleanor leaned forward, such as an agreement to marry and manage the establishment's accounts and correspondence. Precisely. Hawkins tapped the page. A mail order arrangement typically includes specific contractual obligations beyond the marriage itself. If you have documentation of such arrangements with Parker, you could potentially file a continuity claim. I have our correspondence, Eleanor confirmed. Mr. Parker was quite specific about my role in the business. The judge looked satisfied. That's a start, but Hargrove will argue that without the marriage being solemnized, the contract remained unfulfilled. You'd need additional evidence of Parker's intentions and your commitment to the business itself. Eleanor's thoughts turned to the coded entries. If they could locate Parker's hidden documents about the coal discovery and the Pawnee partnership, they might provide the additional evidence needed. Would a business partnership Parker was developing have legal standing even if he died before formalizing it? She asked carefully. Judge Hawkins studied her with increased interest. Potentially, especially if there were drafted agreements or documentation of the preliminary arrangements. Parker was known for his meticulous record-keeping. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside. Thomas appeared at the office door, his expression urgent. "Marshal Collins has returned with the posse," he reported. "There's been a development with the Blackwell gang." They emerged to find Collins dismounting in the yard, his clothing dust-covered and his expression grim. Several other riders waited at a distance, their horses showing signs of hard travel. "Judge," Collins acknowledged with surprise, "didn't expect to find you here." "Legal consultations," Hawkins replied mildly. "What news of Blackwell?" Collins removed his hat, running a hand through his sweat-matted hair. "Tracked them to an old mining camp in the high passes. Found evidence they'd been holding someone prisoner. Blood on the ground, but no bodies." "Prisoners?" Eleanor asked, alarmed. "Who?" "Can't say for certain," Collins replied. "But we found this." He reached into his saddlebag, producing a tattered notebook with a familiar binding. "It's Parker's field journal, last entry dated 3 days before the raid." Eleanor accepted the journal with trembling hands. "Where exactly did you find this?" "Abandoned campsite about 15 miles northwest of here. Looks like they left in a hurry several days ago." Collins studied her intently. "Miss Mitchell, is there something specific Parker might have had that would be valuable to men like Blackwell?" The question hung in the air, fraught with implications. Eleanor exchanged a glance with Thomas, a silent communication passing between them. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion inside," Judge Hawkins suggested, noting the several settlers who had gathered within earshot, curiosity evident in their expressions. Once they were seated around Parker's desk with the door closed, Eleanor made a decision. These men, the judge and the marshal, represented their best hope for navigating the legal and security challenges ahead. If Morning Cloud had deemed her worthy of trust with the Pawnee's future, Eleanor needed to exercise that trust judiciously. "Mr. Parker discovered a significant coal deposit in the mountains west of here," she explained quietly. "According to information I've received, he was developing a formal partnership with the Pawnee, since the deposit lies within their treaty-guaranteed hunting grounds." Collins whistled softly. "That would explain a lot." coals becoming more valuable than gold, to the railroads and eastern industries. And certain interests would go to considerable lengths to ensure such a discovery fell under their control, Judge Hawkins added, his expression troubled. Eleanor opened Parker's journal, carefully turning the pages. The early entries detailed routine trading post operations, but the later pages contained coded notations similar to those in the ledger. He was using some form of cipher, she explained. I believe the full documentation of his discovery and the proposed Pawnee partnership is hidden somewhere, with these codes as the key to finding them. Collins leaned forward, suddenly alert. Miss Mitchell, this goes beyond simple territorial administration. If what you're suggesting is true, Hargrove's interest in this trading post might have nothing to do with commercial reorganization and everything to do with gaining control of those coal fields. And the Pawnee would be forced off their lands, just as they were from their previous territories when valuable resources were discovered, Thomas added bitterly. Judge Hawkins studied Parker's journal thoughtfully. If we could locate Parker's documentation, particularly any draft agreements with the Pawnee, it would significantly complicate Hargrove's plans. Tribal partnerships approved by local judiciary have standing under federal Indian legislation. How much time do we have? Eleanor asked. Hargrove and his entourage were in Silver Lake when I left this morning, Collins replied. They'll arrive by noon tomorrow at the latest. Eleanor touched the blue stone at her throat, drawing strength. From its connection to Morning Cloud and the promise of alliance it represented, then we have until noon tomorrow to decipher Parker's code and locate those documents. As the men discussed potential approaches to breaking the cipher, Eleanor's mind returned to something Morning Cloud had said during their private conversation. Parker kept secrets in plain sight, hidden by what others expected to see. She looked around the trading post office with fresh eyes, seeing it not just as a functional workspace, but as the domain of a man who had developed complex relationships with diverse communities. What would Parker consider in plain sight yet, overlooked by casual observation? The answer came to her with sudden clarity as her gaze fell on the large framed map of the territory hanging on the wall. A map Parker himself had annotated with trading routes, water sources, and other practical information. Information that everyone expected to see on a trader's map. Thomas, she said quietly, interrupting the ongoing discussion, help me take down that map. The large framed piece was heavier than it appeared. As they carefully removed it from the wall, Eleanor turned it over on Parker's desk, examining the heavy paper backing. Do you have a knife? She asked Collins, who produced one without question. With careful precision, Eleanor cut along the edge of the backing paper, then gently peeled it away to reveal what lay hidden beneath. A second map, meticulously drawn, by hand, showing the mountainous region west of the trading post in exceptional detail. Certain areas were marked with the same code symbols that appeared in Parker's journal and ledger, but most significant was the folded document attached to the corner of the hidden map. Official territorial stationery bearing the title Memorandum of Understanding between James Parker, proprietor of Crossing Creek Trading Company, and the Pawnee Nation regarding mineral extraction rights and profit distribution. He hid it where anyone could have seen it, but no one would think to look, Thomas said with quiet admiration. Judge Hawkins accepted the document with careful hands, unfolding it to reveal several pages of detailed legal provisions, witnessed, signatures, and even the territorial seal from a preliminary filing. This is extraordinary, the judge murmured as he read. Parker created a legal framework for cooperative resource development that acknowledges Pawnee's sovereignty while ensuring fair distribution of profits. He even included provisions for environmental protection and cultural preservation. Is it legally binding? Eleanor asked, hope rising. It's preliminary rather than final, Hawkins admitted, but it establishes clear intent and formal relationship. Combined with your contractual arrangement with Parker and evidence of your continued operation of the trading post, it creates a compelling case for continuity rather than reassignment. Marshal Collins studied the hidden map with professional interest. These markings show the exact location of the coal seam, don't they? No wonder Blackwell was after Parker's papers. As the implications of their discovery settled over the room, Eleanor felt a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication of her instincts about Parker, hope for preserving his vision, and growing resolve to face whatever challenges Hargrove would bring tomorrow. "Gentlemen," she said finally, "I believe we have work to do before Agent Hargrove's arrival. Judge Hawkins, can you prepare the necessary legal filings to establish my continuity claim? Marshal Collins, might you be willing to provide official testimony regarding the circumstances of Parker's death and the apparent targeting of his business records?" Both men nodded their agreement, professional respect evident in their expressions. The odds remained daunting, but they were no longer facing territorial authorities without leverage. As they worked late into the evening preparing their legal and strategic response to Hargrove's impending arrival, Eleanor couldn't help but reflect on how dramatically her circumstances had changed in just 3 days. She had arrived expecting to become a frontier trader's wife, only to find herself at the center of a complex conflict involving territorial politics, valuable resources, indigenous rights, and the future of an entire community. The blue stone from Morning Cloud felt warm against her skin, a reminder of unexpected alliances and the strength that came from standing at crossroads between worlds. Tomorrow would bring confrontation with the forces that had perhaps orchestrated Parker's death. Tonight was for preparation, for marshalling the resources, both human and legal, that might preserve what Parker had built and what Eleanor now found herself fighting to protect. Morning arrived with a crystalline clarity unique to the Colorado mountains. Eleanor had slept barely 3 hours, yet emerged from Parker's cabin with determined energy. She had chosen her attire with deliberate care, her most formal dress from Boston, hair neatly arranged, with Morning Cloud's blue stone prominently displayed at her throat. The combination presented precisely the image she intended: Eastern respectability blended with newfound frontier alliance. Thomas was already awake, checking the perimeter of the trading post. "Riders coming from the direction of the Pawnee settlement," he reported, pointing to distant figures moving along the ridge. Eleanor shaded her eyes against the rising sun. "Hunting Cloud?" "Looks like it. And at least 10 others." This unexpected development quickened Eleanor's pulse. After the council meeting, Hunting Cloud had remained skeptical of alliance with a white woman he barely knew. His arrival now, with significant numbers, suggested the Pawnee had reached some decision regarding their involvement. As the Pawnee riders approached, Judge Hawkins emerged from the guest quarters where he'd spent the night finalizing legal documents. "Quite the gathering forming," he observed, straightening his formal coat. "Marshal Collins rode out at dawn to intercept his deputies and bring them here, said something about ensuring proper witnesses for whatever happens today." The Pawnee contingent arrived in the yard with dignified formality. Hunting Cloud dismounted first, followed by Walking Crow and 8 warriors in ceremonial attire. Morning Cloud rode at the rear, her weathered face betraying no emotion as she nodded to Eleanor. "We come to witness," Hunting Cloud announced without preamble, "to see if Parker's vision continues or dies." Eleanor inclined her head respectfully. "Your presence honors us. The territorial agent arrives soon to determine the trading post's fate." Walking Crow approached, studying Eleanor intently before speaking in the Pawnee language. Thomas translated. "He says, the stone speaks well at your throat. The river always finds its path, even through the hardest mountain." Before Eleanor could respond, another group of riders appeared. Marshal Collins with 4 deputies, their expressions alert and professional as they established positions around the trading post. Hargrove's party was breaking camp when I passed Silver Lake, Collins informed them. They'll be here within the hour. 6 men total, including Ketchum and 2 consolidated trading representatives. Judge Hawkins nodded grimly. As expected, corporate interests rarely miss such opportunities. Eleanor gathered her allies near the trading post porch. We should be clear about our approach. Judge Hawkins has prepared legal documents asserting my claim to continuity rights based on my contractual arrangement with Mr. Parker and my demonstrated commitment to maintaining business operations. The partnership agreement with the Pawnee strengthens your position, Hawkins added, particularly with Hunting Cloud present to confirm its authenticity. Marshal Collins adjusted his gun belt. My men will maintain order, but this remains a civil matter unless evidence emerges connecting Hargrove or his associates to Parker's death. Hunting Cloud's expression darkened. Blackwell gang does not act alone in these mountains. Someone guides their raids, pays for specific targets. This direct suggestion of conspiracy silenced the group momentarily. Collins studied the Pawnee leader with newfound interest. You have evidence of this? Pawnee scouts watch the mountain passes, see things white men miss. Hunting Cloud exchanged glances with his warriors. 3 times this season, riders from settlements met with Blackwell. One rider wore clothes like his. He gestured toward Judge Hawkins' formal attire. The implications hung heavily in the morning air. If the Blackwell gang was taking direction from someone within territorial administration or connected to consolidated trading, Parker's death took on more sinister dimensions than a simple raid. Before they could explore this further, dust rose on the trail from Silver Lake. Eleanor straightened her shoulders, touching the blue stone for reassurance. They're here. Everyone remember your role. The approaching party emerged into view, Ketchum riding at the front alongside a distinguished-looking man in expensive Eastern attire, followed by 4 others, including 2 wearing Consolidated Trading Company badges. They slowed upon seeing the unexpected gathering, surprise and displeasure evident in their expressions. Quite the welcoming committee, the distinguished man observed as they halted in the yard. His voice carried cultured Eastern tones overlaid with the hardened edge of frontier authority. I am Reginald Hargrove, Territorial Business Administrator. I see you've assembled interested parties. Eleanor stepped forward, extending the formal courtesy her Boston upbringing had instilled. Mr. Hargrove, I'm Eleanor Mitchell. This is Judge William Hawkins, Marshal David Collins, and Hunting Cloud, representative of the Pawnee community. We're gathered regarding the matter of succession for Parker's trading post. Hargrove dismounted with fluid grace that belied his age, passing his reins to an assistant. Miss Mitchell, Mr. Ketchum mentioned your unfortunate circumstances. His gaze took in her formal appearance, lingering momentarily on the blue stone. At her throat, something like recognition flickered in his eyes before he masked it with professional detachment. Judge Hawkins, he continued, extending his hand, unexpected to find you so far from your courthouse. The administration of justice doesn't always await convenient locations, Hawkins replied mildly. Hargrove turned to Collins. Marshal, I wasn't aware this trading post's future required armed supervision. Standard procedure following violent incidents, Collins replied evenly. The Blackwell gang remains at large. Finally, Hargrove acknowledged Hunting Cloud with a curt nod. I'm afraid tribal interests have no standing in territorial commercial reassignments. This is an administrative matter concerning legitimate business succession. Eleanor detected the subtle strategy in his immediate attempt to exclude the Pawnee from the proceedings. Actually, Mr. Hargrove, the Pawnee have significant standing in this matter, as documented in legal filings we've prepared for your review. Surprise rippled across Hargrove's features before he smoothed them into professional impassivity. Legal filings. I was under the impression this was a straightforward reassignment of an abandoned commercial property. Far from abandoned, Eleanor countered. As you can see, operations continue under my management, in accordance with the contractual agreement established between myself and the late Mr. Parker. Judge Hawkins stepped forward, producing a leather portfolio. I've prepared the relevant documentation demonstrating Miss Mitchell's legitimate claim under Territorial Statute 47, Section 12, regarding business continuity rights. One of the consolidated representatives, a broad-shouldered man with cold eyes, moved closer to Hargrove. This is highly irregular. The Territorial Governor's Office has already approved preliminary transfer of this trading license to Consolidated Operations. Preliminary approvals require final validation based on local circumstances, Hawkins replied smoothly. I believe you'll find Miss Mitchell's claim has legal priority. Tension crackled in the mountain air as Hargrove accepted the portfolio, his expression betraying nothing as he reviewed the documents. The yard had grown crowded with opposing forces, Pawnee warriors observing with stoic dignity, marshals' deputies maintaining vigilant positions, consolidated men exchanging concerned glances, and settlers who had begun to gather, drawn by news of the confrontation. These documents appear to be in order, Hargrove finally acknowledged, but they address only the conventional trading operations. They make no mention of certain additional assets recently identified in this region. The calculated precision of his words confirmed Eleanor's suspicions. This was never about a simple trading post. It was about the coal deposits and who would control them. If you're referring to the mineral resources discovered by Mr. Parker, she replied deliberately, those are fully addressed in the partnership agreement established between Parker's trading company and the Pawnee Nation, whose traditional territories encompass those deposits. Hargrove's composed facade cracked momentarily, genuine shock replacing his administrative detachment. That's impossible. Parker couldn't have formalized any such agreement without territorial approval. Judge Hawkins produced the critical document recovered from behind the map. Preliminary filing registered with my court 3 weeks before Parker's death, properly witnessed and sealed. Hunting Cloud stepped forward, his presence commanding despite Hargrove's attempts to diminish it. Parker honored Pawnee rights to the black stones that burn. Your officials spoke empty words in treaties, but Parker's words carried weight. The consolidated representative moved closer to Hargrove, speaking urgently in low tones. Eleanor could read the mounting frustration in their body language as their carefully arranged plans unraveled. Hargrove recovered his composure, his voice taking on a harder edge. These matters will require thorough review in Denver. In the meantime, this trading post remains under territorial administration until final determination is made. He gestured to his men. Secure the premises and all documentation. Marshal Collins stepped between Hargrove's men and the trading post. Doctor, that won't be happening today, Mr. Hargrove. These are legally filed documents presented by a territorial judge. Until a higher authority countermands them, Miss Mitchell retains operational control of this establishment. The standoff intensified, hands drifting toward weapons on both sides. Eleanor's heart pounded, but she maintained her outward calm, knowing that any sign of weakness would be exploited. The moment of potential violence was broken by an unexpected arrival, Sam Wilson from the Whitaker Ranch, riding hard into the yard. "Marshal Collins," he called, reining in sharply. "Blackwell's been found." All attention shifted to the newcomer. Collins moved quickly to meet him. "Where? Dead or alive?" "Alive, but barely," Wilson reported, dismounting. "Trappers found him in a ravine about 10 miles north. Shot in the back. He's asking for you specifically. Says he needs to make a dying declaration about who's been directing his gang's raids." A charged silence fell over the gathering. Eleanor's gaze locked with Hargrove's, and in that moment she saw something that chilled her, not guilt, but calculated assessment, the look of a man quickly revising strategies in the face of unexpected developments. "Marshal," Hargrove said smoothly, "clearly this takes precedence over administrative matters. You should attend to this criminal immediately. Collins wasn't so easily manipulated. Judge Hawkins can take Blackwell's statement as a dying declaration. My deputies and I will remain here to ensure order while these competing claims are properly documented." Hargrove's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "As you wish. However, I must insist on securing Parker's business records for review in Denver. Standard procedure. Those records remain here as evidence of Miss Mitchell's ongoing business operations," Judge Hawkins countered. "Copies can be provided for your review, of course." The consolidated representative whispered something to Hargrove, who nodded slightly, before addressing Eleanor directly. "Miss Mitchell, perhaps we could discuss this privately. There may be a compromise that satisfies all parties." The attempt to separate her from her allies was transparent. Eleanor smiled politely. "Any discussions regarding the trading post's future should include all stakeholders, including Hunting Cloud as representative of the Pawnee interests." Hargrove's smile thinned. "As you wish." He turned to his entourage. "Gentlemen, let's establish our camp nearby. This matter clearly requires more extensive discussion than anticipated." As Hargrove's party withdrew to a clearing adjacent to the trading post, the tension in the yard dissipated slightly. Judge Hawkins departed with 2 deputies to take Blackwell's statement, while Collins organized the remaining men to maintain watch over both the trading post and Hargrove's camp. Thomas approached Eleanor as she stood watching Hargrove's men establish their site. "This isn't over," he warned quietly. "Men like that don't abandon valuable prizes easily." "No," she agreed. "This was only the first skirmish." She turned to find Morning Cloud beside her, the old woman's eyes reflecting wisdom born of witnessing many such confrontations between competing interests. "The river finds its path," Morning Cloud observed, "sometimes flowing openly, sometimes going underground, but always moving forward." Eleanor touched the blue stone, drawing strength from its connection to this unexpected ally. What happens when Blackwell reveals who's been directing his raids? Morning Cloud's weathered face revealed nothing. Truth is a powerful weapon, but dangerous to those who speak it. Your Marshal Collins should guard this Blackwell carefully. The warning sent a chill through Eleanor. She sought out Collins, sharing Morning Cloud's concern. The Marshal nodded grimly. "Already considered that," he assured her. "My best men are with Hawkins. No one approaches Blackwell without passing through them first." As the day progressed, Eleanor maintained normal trading post operations despite the tension of Hargrove's nearby presence. Several local settlers arrived, ostensibly for supplies, but clearly curious about the confrontation. Their expressions showed clear preference for local management over distant corporate control. By late afternoon, a Pawnee rider arrived with news. Judge Hawkins had taken Blackwell's formal statement and was returning to the trading post. The dying outlaw had indeed named names, though the rider hadn't been privy to the specific details. Eleanor found herself standing on the porch as sunset painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The blue stone at her throat seemed to pulse with energy as she contemplated how dramatically her life had changed in just 4 days. She had arrived seeking marriage and security, only to find herself at the center of a complex struggle involving land rights, valuable resources, and the competing visions for the territory's future. As darkness settled over the Colorado wilderness, Eleanor Mitchell stood at the crossroads of multiple worlds, Eastern and Western, settler and indigenous, past and future, knowing that tomorrow would bring either resolution or escalation to a conflict generations in the making. Whatever came, she would face it with growing confidence in her own capacity to navigate these uncharted territories, both geographical and political. The trading post lights glowed in the gathering darkness, a beacon of contested hope in a landscape where boundaries, both visible and invisible, were being redrawn by forces powerful and personal. Eleanor had arrived as a mail-order bride, seeking a predetermined role. She now stood as something entirely different, a woman discovering her own authority in a land of harsh beauty and harsher conflicts. Night settled over the trading post, bringing not peace, but watchful tension. Eleanor had established rotating watches, Thomas and 2 trusted settlers maintaining vigilance at the main building, while Hunting Cloud's warriors patrolled the perimeter with silent efficiency. From Hargrove's camp came occasional laughter and the clink of glassware, suggesting a confidence Eleanor did not share. She sat at Parker's desk by lamplight, reviewing the partnership agreement with the Pawnee for what felt like the 100th time, searching for any potential weakness Hargrove might exploit. Morning Cloud had joined her, the old woman's presence calming despite the circumstances. "You should rest," Morning Cloud advised, noting the fatigue Eleanor tried to hide. "Tomorrow requires clear vision. I can't help feeling we're missing something," Eleanor replied, rubbing her temples. Hargrove withdrew too easily. Men accustomed to power don't surrender their objectives at the first setback. Morning Cloud nodded sagely. The wolf retreats only to find a different path to the prey. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Thomas entered, his expression concerned. "Judge Hawkins just returned," he reported quietly. "He's asking to speak with you privately. Says it's urgent." Eleanor rose immediately, following Thomas to the small rear storeroom where the judge waited. Hawkins looked exhausted, trail dust coating his formal attire, his face etched with deep concern. "Miss Mitchell?" he greeted her, voice lowered. "What I'm about to share must remain confidential until formal proceedings can be arranged." Eleanor nodded, heart quickening. Blackwell's testimony, more damning than anticipated. Hawkins removed his spectacles, cleaning them with a handkerchief, a nervous gesture at odds with his usual composure. Blackwell provided a signed statement, naming his primary contact, the man who directed specific raids, including the one that killed Parker. He paused, eyes meeting Eleanor's with grim certainty. It was Robert Anderson, Vice President of Consolidated Trading Company, and Hargrove's brother-in-law. The revelation landed like a physical blow. "Hargrove's brother-in-law," Eleanor repeated softly. "Then Hargrove himself may or may not have direct knowledge," Hawkins cautioned. "The connection is highly suggestive, but not conclusive evidence of his involvement. However, it creates a clear conflict of interest in his administration of this case." Eleanor's mind raced through implications. "This changes everything. With this information—" "We must proceed carefully," Hawkins interrupted. "Blackwell is being moved to Silver Lake under guard for formal deposition, but he's barely clinging to life. Until his statement is properly documented and witnesses deposed, we have allegations rather than conclusive evidence." "How long before the formal process is complete?" 2 days, possibly 3. Hawkins looked troubled. "Meanwhile, we must manage a delicate situation here. Hargrove doesn't know what Blackwell has revealed. If he suspects, he might take desperate measures." The warning hung heavily between them. Eleanor considered their position with newly sharpened awareness. "Judge, is there any way to expedite the legal recognition of my claim to the trading post, even temporarily?" Hawkins studied her thoughtfully. "Under normal circumstances, no. But given the evidence of criminal conspiracy, potentially involving territorial officials, I could issue an emergency preservation order maintaining current operations until investigations conclude. He straightened. Decision made. I'll draft it immediately. It won't permanently secure your position, but it will prevent immediate changes during the investigation. After Hawkins departed to prepare the document, Eleanor returned to find morning. Cloud waiting patiently. Bad spirits gather, the old woman observed, reading Eleanor's expression. The truth comes to light. Truth that puts us all in danger, Eleanor confirmed, keeping her voice low. Blackwell has implicated Consolidated Trading in Parker's death. She quickly explained the connection to Hargrove, watching understanding deepen in Morning Cloud's dark eyes. Parker died protecting Pawnee hunting grounds and the Black Stones, Morning Cloud said. Now you stand where he stood, between greed and justice. Eleanor touched the blue stone at her throat. I never sought this role. Few who change history do. Morning Cloud rose with surprising grace for her age. I must speak with Hunting Cloud. Our warriors must prepare for whatever comes. Left alone, Eleanor moved to the window, gazing toward Hargrove's camp. Lanterns still burned, silhouettes moving between tents. Were they simply concluding their evening, or plotting their next move? The revelation of Consolidated's connection to the Blackwell gang transformed her understanding of their adversaries. These weren't merely ambitious businessmen, but potentially conspirators in murder. A sound at the rear of the trading post startled her. Eleanor reached for Parker's shotgun, leaning against the wall, moving cautiously toward the storeroom. The rear door stood ajar, though she distinctly remembered Thomas securing it earlier. "Who's there?" she called, weapon raised. "Just me, Miss Mitchell." The voice belonged to Ketchum, Hargrove's assistant, who stepped from the shadows with his hands visible. "I need to speak with you, alone." Eleanor maintained her defensive position. "You've chosen an unusual approach for a conversation, Mr. Ketchum." "Circumstances require discretion." His eyes darted nervously. "I couldn't be seen coming to you directly." "Why are you here?" Ketchum licked his lips, the gesture betraying uncharacteristic anxiety. "I've served the Territorial Administration for 7 years. Followed regulations, filed reports, maintained proper procedures." He straightened as if bolstering his resolve. "But I never signed on for murder." Eleanor lowered the shotgun slightly. "You know about Anderson and the Blackwell gang?" Surprise flickered across his face. "You're already aware. Then you understand my position. When we received orders to fast-track Consolidated's acquisition of this trading post, I assumed it was the usual political favoritism. I never imagined—" He trailed off, composing himself. "When Hargrove learned of Blackwell's survival and statement to the judge, everything changed." Alarm surged through Eleanor. "Changed how?" "Plans are being modified tonight." Ketchum glanced toward the door nervously. "I came to warn you because there are lines I won't cross, regardless of my official duties. Hargrove has dispatched riders to intercept Blackwell before he reaches Silver Lake. Meanwhile, he intends to secure all documentation from the trading post by force, if necessary." The implications were horrifying. "When?" "After midnight. Most of your people will be sleeping. They think you have minimal security." Eleanor studied Ketchum carefully, looking for deception. "Why are you telling me this? Your career—" "My career isn't worth a man's life," he interrupted, something like dignity emerging through his bureaucratic exterior. "Parker was a good man. I processed his business filings for years. Always honest, always proper. He didn't deserve what happened to him." After providing additional details about Hargrove's plans, Ketchum slipped away through the rear door, leaving Eleanor with critical information and limited time. She moved quickly, gathering Thomas, Marshal Collins, and Hunting Cloud for an urgent council. Collins absorbed the warning with professional calm. "We'll be ready for them. My deputies can position themselves around the building." No, Eleanor decided. If we confront them directly, it becomes our word against territorial officials. We need to catch them in the act, with witnesses who can't be dismissed. Hunting Cloud nodded approval. A trap baited with what they seek. Exactly, Eleanor. Confirmed. We make them believe they've succeeded, then reveal their actions before witnesses whose testimony cannot be ignored. The plan came together quickly. Thomas would appear to secure the trading post normally, but leave specific access points subtly vulnerable. Marshal Collins and his deputies would conceal themselves within the building, while Hunting Cloud's warriors maintained invisible watch from the surrounding area. Judge Hawkins would be positioned with 2 respected settlers as independent witnesses. Most crucially, Eleanor prepared a decoy set of documents, similar enough to the originals, to be convincing under hurried examination, but missing key elements that would make them legally binding. The authentic documents would be secured elsewhere. "What about Blackwell?" Collins asked. "If Hargrove's men intercept him..." "I've already dispatched Pawnee riders on alternate trails," Hunting Cloud interjected. "They will reach your deputies, with warning before Hargrove's men find them." As midnight approached, Eleanor retreated to Parker's cabin as agreed, making a show of retiring for the night. From her window, she observed the trading post, now dark except for a single lantern Thomas had left burning in the office. The bait in their trap. The hours crept by with excruciating slowness. Eleanor found herself touching the blue stone repeatedly, drawing comfort from its solid presence as she waited. Shortly after 2 in the morning, movement caught her attention. Shadowy figures approaching the trading post from the direction of Hargrove's camp. 4 men, moving with attempted stealth. They paused at the edge of the yard, conferring briefly, before continuing toward the building. Eleanor held her breath as they tested the front door, found it securely barred, then moved toward the rear storeroom entrance, the access point deliberately left vulnerable. After several tense minutes, light flickered inside the trading post office, lanterns being lit by the intruders. Eleanor slipped from the cabin, moving carefully to her designated position near the main entrance, where Judge Hawkins and the settler witnesses already waited in concealment. Inside, voices became audible, Hargrove's distinctive cultured tones. Directing the search, another man reporting findings. Eleanor nodded to Thomas, who had emerged from his hiding place nearby. It was time. Marshal Collins moved first, bursting from concealment inside with deputies flanking him, weapons drawn. "Territorial Marshal, nobody move!" Simultaneously, Thomas unbarred the main door, allowing Eleanor, Judge Hawkins, and the witnesses to enter. The scene before them was precisely as anticipated. Hargrove and 3 men rifling through Parker's desk and files, the decoy documents spread across the surface. "Agent Hargrove," Collins announced formally, "you're discovered in unauthorized entry and attempted theft of legal documents. Please explain yourself." Hargrove's composure cracked momentarily before he rallied. "This is absurd. As territorial administrator, I have every right to examine business records relevant to my investigation." At 2 in the morning, without notice or permission, Judge Hawkins stepped forward, his legal authority palpable. "I think not, sir." One of Hargrove's companions, a consolidated trading company representative, moved toward the door, but found his path blocked by Hunting Cloud and 2 warriors who had materialized from the shadows. "This is an outrage," Hargrove blustered. "I am conducting official territorial business. You are conducting a criminal conspiracy," Eleanor interrupted, stepping into the lamplight. "Just as your brother-in-law Robert Anderson conspired with the Blackwell gang to murder James Parker and steal his documentation of the coal deposits." The blood drained from Hargrove's face. "You have no proof of such ridiculous allegations." "Silas Blackwell's signed statement says otherwise, Judge," Hawkins countered, "a copy of which is now safely delivered to the territorial governor's office by special courier. This was a calculated bluff. The statement was still being transported to Silver Lake, but the effect on Hargrove was immediate and devastating. His composed facade collapsed entirely, replaced by the cornered desperation of a man seeing his carefully constructed plans disintegrate. "You don't understand the forces involved," he said, voice dropping. "The governor himself has interests. Inconsolidated. The coalfields are vital to territorial development. The Pawnee hunting grounds are an obstacle to progress that must be removed." "By murder and theft?" Eleanor asked, her voice steady, despite her inner shock at his casual admission. "Those hunting grounds are guaranteed by treaty. Parker found a way to develop resources while honoring Pawnee rights. Your progress is simply another word for greed." Marshal Collins stepped forward, formally addressing Hargrove and his companions. "Reginald Hargrove, you're under arrest for breaking and entering, attempted theft of legal documents, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Your involvement in Parker's murder will be determined by formal investigation." As Collins and his deputies secured the prisoners, Judge Hawkins turned to Eleanor. "You've handled this with remarkable composure, Miss Mitchell. Few would have maintained such clear thinking under these circumstances." Eleanor felt oddly calm, despite the night's dramatic events. "I had excellent allies," she replied, glancing toward Thomas, Hunting Cloud, and the others who had stood with her, "and a cause worth fighting for." Dawn was breaking as Hargrove and his associates were led away, the first golden light illuminating the trading post yard. Eleanor stood on the porch, watching as Hunting Cloud organized his warriors for the return journey to their settlement. Morning Cloud approached, satisfaction evident in her weathered features. "The river finds its path," the old woman said, gesturing toward the blue stone at Eleanor's throat. "And you have found yours." Eleanor touched the stone thoughtfully. "This is just the beginning. Hargrove's arrest doesn't guarantee anything. Not my claim to the trading post, not the Pawnee partnership, not the protection of the coal fields." "No," Morning Cloud agreed with unexpected directness, "but it creates possibility where before there was only threat. Possibility is the seed from which new worlds grow." As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the Colorado wilderness, Eleanor Mitchell contemplated the path that had brought her here. From Boston schoolteacher to mail-order bride to unlikely defender of a vision that bridged worlds. The journey ahead remained uncertain, filled with challenges both legal and practical, but for the first time since arriving at the trading post, uncertainty felt like opportunity rather than danger. She had come west seeking security through traditional means. Instead, she had found something far more valuable, her own capacity to stand firm at the crossroads of changing times, to forge alliances across boundaries others considered impermeable, to continue building what James Parker had begun. The trading post stood at the intersection of multiple worlds, settler and indigenous, east and west, past and future. And now, against all expectations, Eleanor Mitchell stood at its center, no longer a mail-order bride seeking a predetermined role, but a woman discovering her own authority in a land of harsh beauty and even harsher truths. 3 months after Hargrove's arrest, autumn painted the Colorado mountains in brilliant golds and crimsons. Eleanor stood on the trading post porch, surveying the transformation that had taken place since those tumultuous spring days. The main building had been expanded with a new wing dedicated to medical supplies and treatment, a service she'd established after discovering her aptitude for frontier medicine under Morning Cloud's tutelage. A proper stable now housed 6 horses, and the garden had tripled in size, yielding abundant produce for trade and sustenance. Most significant was the new structure taking shape near the creek crossing, a meeting hall designed with input from both settler and Pawnee communities, its architecture blending traditions in physical form. It would serve as neutral ground for negotiations, celebrations, and the ongoing business of bridging worlds. "Supply wagons coming," Thomas called, emerging from the storehouse where he was cataloguing the season's trades. In the months since Parker's death, he had become not just an employee, but a trusted partner in the expanded business. His knowledge of frontier ways complemented Eleanor's organizational skills perfectly. She shaded her eyes, watching the approaching wagon with satisfaction. Regular supply lines had been established following the territorial governor's formal recognition of Eleanor's claim to the trading post. Recognition that came after Blackwell's testimony revealed corruption reaching into the highest levels of territorial administration. The Consolidated Trading Company had collapsed amid scandal, its operations parceled out to smaller, local businesses. Robert Anderson and 3 other executives now awaited trial for conspiracy and murder, while Hargrove served his sentence for lesser, but still serious crimes. "Letter came yesterday from Judge Hawkins," Thomas mentioned, falling into step beside Eleanor as they moved to greet the supply wagon. "Says the territorial legislature is considering your proposal for the protection of indigenous trading rights." Eleanor smiled, touching the blue stone that remained her constant companion. "Progress comes slowly, but it comes." The wagon driver, a weathered man named Jenkins, who had become their regular supplier, greeted them with a respectful tip of his hat. "Miss Mitchell, getting famous you are. Denver newspapers talking about the lady trader of Crossing Creek and your revolutionary business arrangements with the Pawnee." Eleanor accepted the bundle of newspapers he offered. "Fame was never my objective, Mr. Jenkins, just fair commerce and peaceful coexistence." "Well, you're getting more than newspapers," Jenkins added, gesturing to several official-looking envelopes among his deliveries. "Got correspondence from Denver, Washington, and even New York from the look of it." As Thomas supervised the unloading of supplies, Eleanor retreated to the office to examine the unexpected correspondence. The first letter, bearing territorial government seals, officially confirmed her appointment to the newly formed Commission on Indigenous Commerce Relations, a position she had neither sought nor expected. The second, from Washington, contained a more surprising proposal, a request for her documentation and perspective on cooperative resource development for consideration in upcoming treaty negotiations with multiple tribes. Her experiences at Crossing Creek Trading Post were being studied as a potential model for wider application. The third letter, however, was entirely personal. Elegant stationery from Boston's exclusive Beacon Hill neighborhood, addressed in a painfully familiar hand. Eleanor's mother had finally responded to her letters, detailing her unexpected circumstances. With trepidation, Eleanor broke the seal and unfolded the stiff paper. "My dear Eleanor, your recent correspondence has left me utterly confounded. When you departed for Colorado Territory to marry a respectable businessman, I reconciled myself to your frontier existence as at least maintaining basic propriety. The news of your intended's demise should have prompted your immediate return to civilization. Instead, I find you have established yourself as some manner of frontier tradeswoman, engaging in business arrangements with indigenous peoples, and involving yourself in territorial politics. I scarcely recognized my dutiful daughter in these accounts. After considerable reflection and consultation with your father, I have concluded that perhaps we raised you with more independence of spirit than we realized. While I cannot pretend to understand the life you have chosen, I must acknowledge that you appear to be thriving in circumstances that would overwhelm most women of proper upbringing. Your father wishes me to inform you that he has transferred additional funds to your Denver account, not as charity, but as what he terms investment in a promising commercial venture. I believe this represents his roundabout way of expressing approval. Should you find yourself in Boston for business matters, your room remains as you left it. With bewildered but sincere affection, Mother Eleanor found herself laughing through unexpected tears. Her mother's grudging acceptance represented the final severance of her old life, not through rejection, but through the surprising recognition of her new path. The trading post door opened, admitting Hunting Cloud and Morning Cloud. In recent months, their visits had become regular as the partnership between communities deepened. Today, Hunting Cloud carried rolled documents, while Morning Cloud brought her medicine pouch, signs of both business and healing to be discussed. The Eastern woman smiles with water in her eyes. Morning Cloud observed with her characteristic directness. Good news from the paper words? Eleanor wiped her eyes, composing herself. News of acceptance from unexpected places. She gestured to the other correspondents. And signs that what we're building here might influence larger patterns. Hunting Cloud nodded thoughtfully, his initial skepticism long replaced by respectful collaboration. We bring news also. The first black stones have been prepared for trading, small amounts as agreed to demonstrate quality without revealing full extent of deposits. This represented a significant milestone. The careful development of the coal deposits had proceeded according to Parker's original vision, controlled extraction, respecting Pawnee land rights, with profits divided equitably between communities. The mining engineer from Denver arrives. Next week, Eleanor confirmed. He'll help establish proper methods for extraction and evaluate quality for Eastern markets. As they discussed practical matters, Thomas appeared at the door with a troubled expression. Riders coming, armed men. His hand moved instinctively to his sidearm. At least 8, moving fast. Eleanor exchanged glances with Hunting Cloud, who immediately stepped outside to alert his warriors. Though violence had diminished following Hargrove's arrest and Blackwell's death from his wounds, the territory remained untamed, with new threats always possible. She moved to the window, watching as the riders approached. To her surprise, they flew not a gang's colors, but official territorial banners. At their head rode Marshal David Collins, his expression grim as he directed his men to establish a perimeter around the trading post. Something's wrong, Eleanor murmured, moving to meet Collins as he dismounted in the yard. Miss Mitchell, he greeted her with formal urgency. I need to speak with you immediately. There's been a development regarding the coal fields. Inside, Collins removed his hat, declining offered coffee with a shake of his head. Just received. Telegrams from Denver. New interests have petitioned the federal government directly, bypassing territorial authorities. They're claiming the coal deposits are vital to national security and development. Eleanor felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. They're trying to invalidate the Pawnee partnership. Worse, Collins confirmed grimly. They're challenging the legitimacy of the entire treaty, establishing Pawnee hunting grounds. If successful, they could force relocation to reservations further west. The implications were staggering, not just for the business she'd built, but for the delicate peace and cooperation established between communities. Everything they'd accomplished could be undone by distant powers wielding political influence. Hunting Cloud absorbed this news with stoic dignity, though pain flashed in his dark eyes. Always more hunger for land, for what lies beneath it. Your people's promises blow away like leaves in autumn wind. These aren't my people, Eleanor said firmly, touching the blue stone at her throat. And this isn't over. Morning Cloud, who had remained silent, now spoke with unexpected force. The river finds its path even when mountains rise before it, sometimes flowing around, sometimes cutting through, sometimes going beneath, but always forward. Eleanor recognized the wisdom in the old woman's words. This new threat represented not an ending but another challenge on a journey that had never promised to be easy. The connections forged between communities, the trust built through shared purpose, these weren't easily dismissed by distant officials, no matter how powerful. "Marshal," she said, decision-forming. "How soon can Judge Hawkins arrange a hearing? We need to assemble our documentation and witness testimonies immediately." Collins straightened, responding to her determination. "I'll dispatch a rider today. Hawkins respects what you've built here. He'll expedite proceedings." Turning to Hunting Cloud, Eleanor continued, "We need Walking Crow and the other elders to document the spiritual and historical significance of these lands. The treaty may be vulnerable, but federal Indian law recognizes certain religious freedoms." For the first time that day, Hunting Cloud's expression lightened. "You learn our ways well, Eleanor of Crossing Creek. Walking Crow will speak with power about sacred places among the coal fields." As Marshal Collins departed with promises of support, Eleanor moved to the trading post porch. The afternoon sun illuminated the expanded operation, the new construction, the blended communities working together. Tangible evidence of a vision becoming reality despite persistent opposition. Thomas joined her, his presence a steady reminder of how much had changed since her arrival. "Another battle," he observed quietly. "Part of a longer war," Eleanor agreed. "Not with weapons, but with competing visions for what this territory could become." Parker understood that. "Now I do too." She touched the blue stone, drawing strength from its connection to Morning Cloud's wisdom and the alliance it represented. The path ahead would demand every skill she'd developed, every relationship she'd built, every ounce of determination she possessed. But she was no longer the uncertain Boston schoolteacher who had arrived seeking security through traditional means. Eleanor Mitchell, of Crossing Creek Trading Post, now stood firmly at the intersection of worlds in transition, not as an outsider, but as a woman who had found her true purpose in bridging divides others considered unbridgeable. Whatever challenges arose, she would meet them with the same courage and adaptability that had transformed a mail-order bride's shattered dreams into something far more meaningful than she could have imagined. As sunset painted the Colorado mountains in breathtaking hues, Eleanor returned to Parker's, now her desk, to begin drafting letters to potential allies in Denver, Washington, and even Boston. The struggle for Crossing Creek's future, for the Pawnee partnership, for a vision of cooperation rather than conquest, continued one carefully chosen word at a time. The journey that had begun with a stagecoach arrival at a frontier trading post had no fixed destination, only the daily choice to move forward with integrity, building connections where others saw only boundaries, creating possibility where others accepted limitation. It was not the life Eleanor had sought when responding to James Parker's advertisement for a bride, but it had become something far more valuable. A life of purpose discovered through unexpected challenge, and of legacy built at the crossroads of a changing world. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.